Imagine going down in history not for your greatest achievements, but for being killed by a tortoise dropped on your head from the sky. That actually happened. Welcome to the most bizarre, ironic, and downright unbelievable deaths ever recorded in human history. From ancient philosophers who laughed themselves to death, to inventors killed by their own creations, these stories prove that sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Here are the craziest ways people have died throughout history. Entry 1. The father of tragedy killed by a tortoise. We're starting in ancient Greece around 455 BCE with a man named Aeschylus. If that name sounds familiar, it should. He's known as the father of tragedy, one of the greatest playwrights who ever lived. The man literally invented dramatic dialogue. His works were so revered that after his death, the Athenians allowed only his plays to be restaged in competitions, an honor given to no other playwright. So, how did such a legendary figure meet his end? According to the Roman author Pliny, an eagle flying overhead spotted Aeschylus walking below and mistook his bald head for a rock. The eagle was carrying a tortoise, you see, and eagles crack tortoise shells by dropping them onto rocks. The bird released the tortoise, it struck Aeschylus directly on the head, and the impact killed him. Here's where it gets truly ironic. Historical accounts state that Aeschylus had been staying outdoors specifically to avoid a prophecy that he would be killed by a falling object. Some say he believed he could escape fate by staying away from buildings. Instead, death found him in the open air, delivered by two animals and a cruel twist of destiny. A fitting end, perhaps, for the man who spent his life writing about fate's inescapable grip. Entry 2. The philosopher who died, laughing at his own joke. Staying in ancient Greece, let's talk about Chrysippus, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers of the 3rd century BCE. Stoicism is all about emotional control, rational thinking, and keeping your composure no matter what life throws at you. Chrysippus reportedly died at the age of 73, and the cause? Laughter. According to the biographer Diogenes Laertius, during the 143rd Olympiad, Chrysippus watched a donkey eating his figs. Finding this absolutely hilarious for reasons lost to time, he reportedly shouted, "Now give the donkey some wine to wash down the figs." He then proceeded to laugh so hard at his own joke that he collapsed. The fit of laughter was so violent that, according to the account, he simply could not stop. Whether from asphyxiation or cardiac arrest, triggered by the uncontrollable laughter, Chrysippus died. The great irony? This was a man who literally wrote books about keeping emotions in check.
Oh my God.
His treatise on passions taught people how to use reason to control their feelings, and yet, in the end, a drunk donkey joke got the better of him. Some historians believe it may have actually been alcohol poisoning at a feast. But honestly, the donkey story is just too perfect. Entry 3, the flying tailor of the Eiffel Tower. Paris, France, February 4th, 1912. A bitter cold morning. Franz Reichelt was an Austrian-born tailor living in Paris who had become obsessed with a noble idea, saving the lives of pilots. Early aviation was incredibly dangerous and crashes were common. Reichelt believed he could create a wearable parachute suit, something a pilot could simply deploy if their aircraft went down. He spent years designing what he called a bat suit, a wearable coat that would expand into a parachute. He tested it repeatedly using dummies dropped from his 5th-floor apartment. The results were not promising. Dummies crashed. His designs failed. Experts at the Aero Club de France told him bluntly, "The surface of your device is too weak. You will break your neck." But Reichelt was convinced his invention just needed more height to work properly. He received permission to conduct a test from the Eiffel Tower, with the understanding that he would use a dummy. He showed up that morning wearing the suit himself. Friends, reporters, and even police begged him to reconsider. He spent 40 agonizing seconds standing on the first platform, 187 feet up, perhaps gathering courage or fighting doubt. Then he jumped. The parachute did not deploy. It folded around him like a shroud. He plummeted straight down and struck the frozen ground in just 4 seconds. The impact was so severe it left a 6-inch depression in the earth. Franz Reichelt, the flying tailor, died believing in his invention until the very last moment. The entire tragic scene was captured on film by newsreel cameras, footage that still exists today.
Entry 4. The lawyer who shot himself, proving self-defense. This one sounds like it was written for a courtroom drama, but it actually happened in Lebanon, Ohio, in June of 1871. Clement Vallandigham was a prominent lawyer and former U.S. congressman. He was defending a man named Thomas McGeehan, who was accused of shooting and killing someone during a bar fight. Vallandigham's defense strategy was brilliant. He planned to prove that the victim had actually shot himself accidentally while drawing his own pistol. To demonstrate this theory, Vallandigham conducted experiments the night before. He fired shots into cloth to analyze gunpowder residue patterns. Satisfied with his findings, he returned to his hotel room, his pistol still containing 3 loaded rounds. Here's where things went wrong. There were 2 pistols on the table, one loaded, his, and one unloaded, the victim's. While demonstrating to fellow lawyers how the victim could have shot himself, Vallandigham grabbed the wrong gun. He placed it in his pocket, drew it out to simulate the victim's actions, and accidentally discharged it directly into his own stomach. According to accounts, he immediately exclaimed, "I have foolishly shot myself." Surgeons could not locate the bullet. Vallandigham died the following day from infection. And the twist? His demonstration worked. Thomas McGeehan was acquitted. The defense had proven the victim could have shot himself because their own lawyer had just done exactly that. 4 years later, McGeehan himself died in another saloon shooting. Entry 5. The Great Molasses Flood of Boston. January 15th, 1919. Boston, Massachusetts. The weather was unseasonably warm for a winter day. Temperatures had climbed above 40 degrees. In the North End neighborhood, near the waterfront, stood a massive steel tank, 50 feet tall, 90 feet wide, holding 2.5 million gallons of crude molasses, which is a byproduct of refining sugar canes into sugar. Local residents had noticed for years that the tank leaked. The company's solution? Paint it brown to hide the dripping syrup. Then it happened. At approximately 12:30 in the afternoon, the tank burst. What followed was beyond imagination. A 15-foot wall of molasses exploded into the streets at an estimated 35 miles per hour. Because molasses is denser than water, about 1.5 times heavier, the wave behaved more like a landslide than a flood. According to the Boston Post, the scene was apocalyptic. Molasses, waist-deep, covered the street and swirled and bubbled about the wreckage. Here and there struggled a form. Whether it was animal or human being was impossible to tell. 21 people were killed. Approximately 150 were injured. Horses died trapped in the sticky mass like flies on flypaper. The molasses knocked an elevated train off its tracks and collapsed the local firehouse. Here's the terrible part. Rescue was nearly impossible. The molasses cooled quickly in the winter air and began to harden. Victims who weren't killed instantly found themselves trapped, slowly suffocating in the thickening syrup. The cleanup took weeks. Boston reportedly smelled like molasses for decades afterward. And to this day, locals claim that on hot summer days, you can still catch a faint whiff of sweetness near the old tank site. Entry 6. The Leaping Lawyer of Toronto. Gary Hoy was a successful corporate lawyer at Holden Day Wilson, one of the largest law firms in Toronto. He was 38 years old, well-liked by colleagues, and known for an unusual party trick. He would throw himself against the windows of his 24th floor office to demonstrate their strength. The glass was designed to be unbreakable, and Hoy had performed this stunt many times without incident. On July 9th, 1993, the law firm was hosting a reception for prospective interns. Hoy decided to show off his famous trick. He threw his body against the window. It held. The students were impressed. So he did it again. This time, the window didn't shatter, but the entire pane popped out of its frame. Gary Hoy fell 24 stories to his death. A police officer reported he was showing his knowledge of the tensile strength of window glass, and presumably the glass gave way. A structural engineer later noted, "I don't know of any building code in the world that would allow a 160-pound man to run up against a glass and withstand it." The shock of losing one of its most popular partners reportedly contributed to the firm's decline and eventual closure in 1996. At the time, the largest law firm collapse in Canadian history. Entry 7. The Viking Earl killed by a severed head. This one comes from the Orkney saga, and it's pure Viking poetic justice. Sigurd Eysteinsson, known as Sigurd the Mighty, was the second Earl of Orkney in the late 9th century. He was a feared warrior who conquered much of northern Scotland through brutal military campaigns. His nickname, the Mighty, was earned through conquest and bloodshed. Around 892 CE, Sigurd challenged a local Pictish ruler named Maelbricta, nicknamed the Buck-Toothed for obvious reasons, to a battle. They agreed to a fight of 40 men against 40. Sigurd, being a treacherous Viking, showed up with 80 men instead. The Picts were massacred. Sigurd personally beheaded Maelbricta and strapped the severed head to his saddle as a trophy. The Vikings rode home to celebrate their victory. But during the journey, something happened. The bucktooth that gave Maelbricta his nickname scraped against Sigurd's leg as the head bounced around. It was a small cut. Sigurd probably didn't think much of it. The wound became infected. The infection spread, and Sigurd the Mighty died from the injury, killed by the very man he had beheaded. Historical accounts state he was buried in a mound known as Sigurd's How, somewhere in northern Scotland. And Maelbricta the Bucktoothed got his revenge from beyond the grave. Entry 8. The King Who Ate Himself to Death. Sweden, February 12, 1771. Shrove Tuesday, the traditional feast day before Lent, when Christians indulge in rich foods before weeks of fasting. King Adolf Frederick of Sweden took this tradition very seriously. According to contemporary accounts, the king sat down to a meal that included lobster, caviar, sauerkraut, smoked herring, and champagne. A feast fit for royalty. But that wasn't enough. For dessert, Adolf Frederick called for semlas, traditional Swedish buns filled with almond paste and whipped cream, served in a bowl of hot milk. These were his favorite sweets. He ate 14 of them. Hours later, the king was dead. The official cause? Digestive complications. Or, as Swedes still say today, he ate himself to death. It's worth noting that historians debate whether the semlas actually killed him or whether he simply had a stroke that coincided with a large meal. Modern writers have even suggested the death by dessert story may have been propaganda. The king was 60 years old and reportedly in poor health. But the legend persists. And today, Adolf Frederick is remembered not for the 2 peaceful decades of his reign, but for being the man who couldn't stop eating cream buns. Exiting 9. The mayor killed by his own beard. Braunau am Inn, Austria, September 28, 1567. Hans Steininger was the beloved mayor of this small border town, having been elected 6 times. He was well liked by his constituents and known for his leadership, But what really made him famous was his beard. Get this. Steininger's beard measured 4.5 feet long, probably the longest recorded beard of the era. It trailed on the ground when unrolled. To avoid accidents, he typically kept it neatly rolled up and tucked into a special leather pocket. On that September night, a fire broke out in town. As mayor, Steininger rushed to help coordinate the response. In the chaos and panic, his beard came loose from its pocket. He was too focused on the emergency to notice or care. While standing at the top of a staircase, he stepped on his own trailing beard. The movement sent him tumbling down the entire flight of stairs. He broke his neck on impact and died instantly. The townspeople were devastated. They erected a stone monument of Steininger on the side of St. Stephen's Church, showing him with his magnificent beard flowing down past his feet. And they kept the actual beard. Over 450 years later, Hans Steininger's preserved beard is still on display at the District Museum in Braunau am Inn. The town even offers tours led by guides dressed as Steininger, complete with flowing fake beards. A reminder, perhaps, that even the things we're most proud of can become our downfall. From ancient philosophers to modern lawyers, from Viking warlords to Swedish kings, these stories remind us of something both humbling and profound. Life can end in ways no one could possibly predict. A tortoise from the sky, a joke about a drunk donkey, a beard, a pastry. Fate, it seems, has a dark sense of humor. If these stories fascinated you, consider subscribing for more deep dives into history's strangest chapters. And maybe, just maybe, be a little more careful around staircases, windows, and incredibly long facial hair. Thanks for watching.